Welcome to our Wednesday interview. We're with Holland Fields today. Holland is a full-time employee at AU and has been involved in the foster care system for the last 5 years. Recently, Sage Home was dreaming about ways to start providing services and support for families struggling with, the foster care system and addiction. And we reached out to Holland about if she was willing to try to foster a mom and a baby together. And that was, how long ago was that, Holland?
That was in December.
In December. Welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we reached out to Holland to see if she would be willing to foster a mom and a baby together, so we could start providing services before we have a location. And that has been about a 6-month journey. And I wanted to interview Holland to kind of check in and kind of let you know what how that's going and some of the barriers that came up with that. So Holland,
Yeah.
being here, my first question for you was, what were you hoping for when you kind of had this idea of being able to foster a mom with her newborn baby?
Yeah. I think, Marca, my friendship with you and learning about what Sage Home was, and knowing that Sage Home wasn't up and running yet, I was like, this is important that we help create environments for mothers and babies to be together. And so we said yes because of learning really what Sage Home has taught us, in that how important that is for just the health of both the mom and the baby. And so we have always just had this policy about our house is a place for people to be and to grow, and it can be a refuge. And so we had a room, and we wanted to say yes to be a part of this, to see what could come from a mom and a baby staying with us. And so what happened, though, was the mom moved in and then DCS took the baby. And so we never actually got to have the baby in our home. And so there were a lot of barriers. We kind of were expecting something totally different. And that just all from everyone, the mom, from us, we all were just like, didn't expect that to happen. And so, yeah, our expectations were that we would help this mom get back on her feet, have free rent, a stable home, a healthy environment, and that in 6 months would be able to go and find a home and a job and have a stable environment, an autonomous place on her own without us stepping in to help. But that was not the case. There were some barriers.
Yeah, walk me through a little bit of what barriers came up.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I noticed overall was communication is a huge barrier. No one knew what the actual case plan was. Timing was crazy. Court dates weren't communicated. And a lot of times we want to blame the foster moms or like the bio moms and be like, well, they didn't know any better. And I was watching this happen, and it just felt like no one knew what was going on, but yet it's really easy to blame the mom and be like, oh, they didn't show up, they didn't know. And so that was a huge barrier in watching communication. And I also understand too, there's a lot of people involved and a lot of decisions to be made. But there's not a streamlined process of who gets communicated to. So that was a huge barrier of just not really knowing what's going on. And then my husband and I being people of like, we just are letting them live with us. So no one technically has to communicate with us. We're not actually involved other than providing a room and a space. But then another barrier is we watch this mom have to not only deal with the grief of her baby being taken away, but it felt like it was out of the blue. That was not what was expected. That was not what was ever communicated before. And so she's dealing with that grief on top of just feeling like, how do I do this? Like, where do I go from here? And having birthed children myself, there is a real postpartum, just stuff that you have to deal with after having a baby, physically, emotionally. And then when you don't have that baby, you almost lose that hope and that drive. And this mom was resilient and kept um, trying to get back on her feet. But there was this just grief. I don't know how else to describe it. Trying to just sit with what just happened, the shock of your baby being taken away. But then what they're telling you is, here's what you have to do to get your baby back. But it's like, well, physically, you just had a baby. How can you get up and start walking around everywhere to find a job? And so there had to be this healing time. But then also the system wasn't supporting you. So what are you going to do about it? I can't, my husband and I couldn't go out and find a job for her. We could connect her to resources, but ultimately I think one of the barriers was it really was all on her, and it felt, I think, overwhelming. So the cartoons just turned on in the living room. You can probably hear them now.
And can you explain kind of what happened and why she wasn't able to keep her baby in the home with you? Because I feel like that was a big barrier.
Yeah. So one of the big barriers, and we are all a little confused on why the baby was actually taken. But that happened, and then DCS was saying that she couldn't be with the baby unsupervised. And we were like, okay, so how can, we were trying to talk through all these different ideas, well, how can we figure out to have the baby here? And one of the ideas was that my husband and I would become the guardians. But we have been foster parents before for a teenager. And at this point in our life, we are both working full time. We also have 2 little ones. And I know the responsibility it takes to be a foster parent. And we just weren't able to say yes to that, with integrity. We couldn't be with that baby 24/7. And what we had signed up for was that we wanted to support a mom to take care of her baby. We didn't want to take care of the baby. Of course, we want snuggles and love and to be a part of that baby's life, but we wanted to support the mom who we believe would be the best caretaker with the supportive environment around her. And so that was tricky because we had to say no to something that we wanted this mom to be with the baby, but we also understood this wasn't really setting the mom up to be the caretaker. And so that was a huge barrier, and there was kind of no getting around it. There was no other options. And so that was a sad and hard decision to make, but I do think looking back, it's what we had to do.
Right. Okay. So not only was there very few options to support you in housing a mom and a baby because you couldn't be with a baby 24 hours a day.
Right.
Just the mom's physiological experiences after postpartum, not having the baby, the struggles it was for her to kind of have to do all the things without a lot of support on the system, and the trouble with communicating. And then, the foster care system in general is understaffed and underfunded.
Oh, yes.
So the stress around that created a lot of barriers for this situation in particular.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then, as we're kind of closing this interview, how do you see Sage Home being able to support that and address those barriers more effectively?
Honestly, this whole time, these last 6 months, I just kept thinking, this is why we need Sage Home, because my husband and I weren't equipped to give this mom the support she needed. I mean, we gave her what we could, but when I look at what she truly needs, she needs emotional and mental support around her. And then she needs a stable environment. She needs people who will advocate for her in the legal realm, because there was a lot that I watched where I go, I just don't understand. No one understands. We need someone to help better explain and then fight for and with that mom. And so when I think of Sage Home, I think it encompasses all of those things, to where the system is not equipped. Like what you said, they're understaffed and underfunded. And so they're doing what they can, but it just feels like you're doing what you can to get the paperwork done. And so it leaves, in my experience with our foster son and with this mother, they just feel defeated. And it is hard to keep going when you feel defeated and against the system constantly. And so I think where Sage Home comes in is they bring a very holistic approach to supporting this mom, not just to, oh, look, we're supporting this mom so we can feel better so that they can get on their feet and then they're out of their way to maybe crash again, but really to set up families to keep going and to break cycles and to create better environments for the long term for them and their children. And so I think there are all these times where I go, okay, we're giving her this room, but she needs so much more. And there's an element of, there is a piece that these moms need to own, right? They're adults and they need to step into this on their own. But when you look at the cycles of what they've been through, they need a lot more help. And we have to give them that support. We can't just expect them to go out and get a job once their baby's been taken from them. They need a lot more support. And so if that's what we're saying, okay, get a job, go get a stable house, you know, be a great mom, we have to back it up with our actions, I think. And that's where Sage Home comes in to provide all of those supports.
Yeah, that was very well said. And yeah, I appreciate just how your willingness to say yes, even though things weren't, worked out or thought out, and how you have the insight into the barriers now because you said yes to that experience. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. We were just having that conversation, my husband and I, last night about, that didn't really go the way we expected any step of the way, but we are grateful for it, because what we want to do is be advocates for, and I told mom, you one day are going to be an advocate for moms in your situation. Like, we are not going to keep letting this happen. And so we want to be able to be on the other side of being like, okay, we tried that didn't really work. Like, we need Sage Home to be happening and up and running. So we believe in what you're doing. And I think it takes these kind of trial and errors to really figure out, how do we make this better for other people in the future?
Well, thank you so much, Holland, for sharing that. And
Yeah.
You've been such a huge part of Sage Home already. And I appreciate you meeting for an interview. Thank you.
Thank you, Marca. I appreciate you. You're amazing.
Bye.
Cool. Bye.